Hello everyone, I'm Nakui from Birds of Play, and in this video we're going to be comparing the Japanese and the English versions of the newly released teaser trailer for Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker. The differences won't be anything too groundbreaking, but if you're interested in some of the more subtle nuances that exist between the Japanese and the English versions of Final Fantasy XIV, then this might be the video for you. If you end up liking the video, and if you're ready for more Final Fantasy in your life, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and join the Birdhouse. But without further ado, let us walk to the end together. So we're just going to be watching the teaser together, in Japanese of course, and I'll be pausing the video whenever I have something to say, like right now, because even though you might not be able to make it out clearly, we can actually hear our first lines of text in the trailer, or maybe more accurately lyrics, since the new Endwalker theme song seems to have some English lyrics. The main thing to note here, however, is that it's the same in both versions, meaning that there doesn't seem to be a separate Japanese version of the song, which seems to be pretty standard for Final Fantasy XIV, most of the English songs not having a Japanese counterpart. So I've added some subtitles to the trailer. Firstly we have the Japanese, and then below that we have a sort of literal translation of the Japanese, and then at the very top we have the English version as it is presented in the English version of the trailer. So you can sort of get to compare the two. One of the first things to note here about the language being used is that the English version seems to have a lot more flourish to it, employing the sort of medieval tone that characters like Urianger then take to the extreme. Meanwhile, the Japanese is a lot more straightforward and modern, and one of the reasons for this, I think, is that sometimes when using a sort of older, more classical version of Japanese, it can sometimes be evocative of Japanese history specifically, and particular periods in Japanese history. So even though medieval English might evoke ideas of a Shakespearean past, classical Japanese might not be said to have the same effect. Also, I'm not sure what life is being referenced here, and whether it's the life of the creatures that inhabit the planet, or whether it's something more like the lifeblood of the planet itself. Nice. Nice. Very nice. Now, since I play Final Fantasy XIV in English, I was really surprised how much softer Alice's demeanor seems to be in the Japanese version. Her voice is a lot more feminine for one thing, and I also feel like the English line is a little bit more hostile, as if Alphinaud's interference is a bit more unwelcome. I'm not really commenting about which version I prefer, so it's just an observation at this point. What I find most interesting about this line in Japanese is the part about moving on to the next, implying that there seems to be an onslaught of monsters that they need to take care of, much like we experienced while playing through Amarot in the game itself. I would also like to mention this wa that Alice adds to the end of her sentence, since it's typically a feminine marker, so it's not only her voice that is more feminine in the Japanese version, but also her way of speaking. Hot. Hot. So hot. I mean, here we see a familiar line in the English version about the far edge of fate, which was the name of patch 3.5. In the Japanese version as well, this is an allusion to the same patch. Now that we've come to the end of the teaser trailer, we are greeted with the Japanese version of the Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker logo, which might seem identical to the English one, but it does have this little bit of extra text that reads Gyogetsu no Shuen or Gyogetsu no Finare, which might be translated as something like the end or the finale of the morning moon, that then signals the breaking of a new dawn, which seems somewhat appropriate considering that the end of Endwalker will signal the beginning of a new story arc for Final Fantasy XIV. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and let us keep you company as we wait for the eventual release of Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker. Time for some bird sounds. Caw-caw!